Hi, this is Matthew Robert Payne, and this is chapter 65 of His Redeeming Love. I was attending Newtown Mission Church in Sydney, Australia, and it was a uniting church. And this was the church where Pastor Brian prophesied over me and declared that I was going to move in the prophetic and become a prophet. And the church allowed me to speak in their church and share prophecies in their church. Initially, they used to let us speak, and then they moved on to us having to give them idea of what the prophecy was and then share the prophecy. But it came time where I was getting a little tired of Newtown Mission. It seems that I almost needed to use my prophetic gift to actually talk to people. I seemed to have to tell people about what God was saying to them and use my gift of prophecy, talking about their lives and intimate details of their lives and what God was saying to them personally, to just keep in conversations. It seems that I was so hurt and broken and unhealed that I just didn't seem to fit in the church. Phil, my friend, had gone to Newtown Mission and said that he didn't like it and had left Newtown Mission simply because he said he was in a better mood when he came to church, and he felt so rejected and not understood at church that he used to leave feeling a whole lot more depressed. And he said to himself that he feels depressed enough, let alone going to a church and being rejected and feeling even more depressed. So both Yanni and Phil had homosexual behaviour in their past, as I had, but Phil for many years was a practicing homosexual, and Yanni for a few more years than I was a practicing homosexual, and so they had that. Yanni hasn't got a mental illness, he's got a learning disability, but hasn't got a mental illness, and but Phil felt rejected and just didn't seem to fit in. Phil actually took a lot of time to get himself to be drawn out of himself. He was a private person, and it was hard for him to communicate, and so he was best with someone who did a lot of the talking, and he was able to make comments and make conversation, but he wasn't particularly good at starting conversations. He didn't understand women. He'd spent all his life sleeping with men and being with men. He didn't know how to really interact with women, and so life at Newtown Mission Church was hard. When I initially heard about Newtown Mission from Phil and Yanni, I heard good things about Newtown Mission from Yanni, and I heard bad things about Newtown Mission from Phil. And I initially went to the church just to see who was right, and after a while at the church, not really developing any friends, I really only had one friend that I'd made at Newtown Mission that I saw outside of Newtown Mission, outside of the church services, and I only saw that friend once because I'd said so, that no one's friends with me outside of church hours, and he made an appointment to see me outside of church hours to prove me wrong. But I felt rejected at Newtown Mission. I think many people go to churches and they just don't seem to fit in. They don't have a good job, they don't have a good car, they don't have an iPhone, they don't have all the mod cons that didn't have iPhones in 2002, but they don't have the latest mobile phone, they don't have a good job, they don't have a good Apple computer, they don't have a normal life, and they certainly don't have a mental illness like I did, and a bit weird talking about Jesus all the time and talking about how Jesus talks to me and meeting angels and all sorts of things that I did. And I just kind of like Yanni, I suppose, I so used to feeling rejected and being rejected, but perhaps I said things that allowed people to reject me. I was pretty confused and pretty hurt and pretty broken. If you've read my book so far or listened to the videos, you realise that I've had a pretty dark and tortured life, and so I wasn't a particularly great person to know. I had a lot of heart and a lot of emotion and a lot of love to share, though I wasn't given the opportunity. I just didn't seem to fit in. I remember me and Yanni went to a Bible study at Newtown Mission one night. And we seemed to dominate the Bible study, answering the questions and saying comments on all the questions. And me and Yanni seemed to dominate the Bible study. And we were told the next week by the Bible study leader that we weren't welcome back at the Bible study. And that was my experience with Bible studies, that I often go to Bible studies and I seem to have an answer for every question, and a lot of people, when asked questions, hold back on their answers because they're unsure of themselves. And I seem to have a go at every question and seem to have an answer, and a lot of time my answers are right. Or a lot of time my answers sound right and sound plausible. And so I seem to dominate conversations in Bible studies, and people don't like the person who's speaking all the time, who seems to think they have an answer to every question. And I know myself, when I come across people that are talking all the time in a meeting, you sort of rise up and get you get upset about them speaking all the time. So I can imagine I can imagine people getting upset with me talking all the time in that meeting. So it was hard. I went to Newtown Mission for a year or two, and the longer I went, the more sadder I was becoming, simply because you want friends outside of your mentally challenged Yanni friend and Phil, who's bipolar friend. I sort of wished that I had like a normal friend, a friend that didn't have things wrong with themselves, that had a normal life and a good job. I sort of wished for friends that were more real and more together and more perfect life, rather than people who the world would consider losers and unwise. I remember the verse in Corinthians that says, God chooses the foolish ones and the foolish things to shame the wise. It's in 1 Corinthians 1, and I remember that verse, and that speaks well of Yanni and me. Yanni may be mentally challenged, but sometimes the Lord moves on Yanni and gives him words to say, and the wisdom that comes out of his mouth is profound and blows people away. The sad thing is that many times what he has to say is not so profound, and people don't hang around long enough to get the pearls out of everything that's said. And so I felt rejected at Newtown Mission, like I've said, and I started to experience what Phil was experiencing, that every week seemed harder to go, and the more I tried to get friends, the more I tried to impress people and say things that would make them like me, the more rejected I felt, and I seemed to have the wrong responses. You know how you're talking to someone and they make an excuse and say they've got to talk to someone else, and they walk off and talk to someone else and never come back to talk to you. That was happening to me quite often, and it was sad, and I was sad. I was not in a good place, and it's not a hard thing to ask to actually go to a church, or it shouldn't be a hard thing to ask to go to a church and actually make friends. But it seemed that after a year or two at Newtown Mission, that the only friend I had was the friend I walked into Newtown Mission with, and I was after a year or two, I was starting to agree with Phil that the church made me more upset than it made me happy.